I bought plane tickets for the entire family, but at the airport, my husband announced, "We gave your ticket to my mother. The kids love her more." And my mother-in-law smiled beside him, as if this betrayal was something noble. In that moment, something inside me didn't explode. It crystallized, sharp and cold. I nodded silently and walked away. And a minute later, I did something that made them beg me to cancel their trip. Before I tell you, please like and subscribe to hear more true stories of family loyalty and betrayal that might change the way you look at your own relationships. Hartsfield, Jackson. International Airport was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. To most people, this sound meant excitement. To me, it carried the familiar weight of responsibility, because I was always the one who carried everything for this family. I stood slightly away from the check-in counter, holding a leather folder with 5 passports and the printouts I had purchased myself, funded by the freelance work I did late at night after the children were asleep. The Maldives. Azure Bay. Not just a resort, a private club. The kind of place I had never been able to afford until I learned to sacrifice sleep in exchange for income. I planned this entire trip over 6 months. Officially, a family vacation. Unofficially, my last attempt to remind my husband, Sterling, that our marriage needed oxygen. I paid for everything: business class seats, the seaplane transfer, and the overwater villa with a private pool. I wanted to give our twins, Cairo and Zuri, a memory they could hold onto. I wanted to give Sterling a chance to reconnect. And yes, I even invited his mother, Odessa, for a day visit at the end of the trip, hoping peace could grow if I watered it long enough. But now, standing under the cold airport lights, I felt something heavy in the air. Sterling stood a few yards away, hunched over his phone, avoiding my gaze like a child hiding a broken vase. Odessa hovered next to him, wrapped in leopard print, dripping with gold bangles, whispering into his ear with that familiar smirk she saved only for moments when she believed she had won. I noticed her massive luggage the second she stepped into the terminal. I thought she had come to see us off. She loved playing the dramatic, teary-eyed grandmother, but her suitcase had a priority tag. Her name was written where mine should have been. The realization hit slowly, like cold water seeping into my bones. The airline employee called our group forward. Sterling approached, but Odessa pushed ahead, placing 4 passports on the counter with theatrical confidence. Mine was missing. "Sterling," I said quietly, "where is my passport?" Odessa answered for him. "Sweetheart, we gave your ticket to me. The kids are so attached to their grandma. You know how it is." My hands tightened around the folder. "You gave my seat to you?" "Don't be dramatic," Odessa said, waving dismissively. "You always look tired. A 14-hour flight would drain you. Let Mama go in your place. I'm more fun." Sterling finally looked up, not with shame, but with a practiced helplessness he always used to avoid responsibility. "Val, don't make a scene. It just makes sense. The kids love traveling with her. And you can rest. You're always complaining about being exhausted." "I'm exhausted," I said evenly, "because I do everything." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence confirmed everything. I had married a man who believed convenience was more important than loyalty. Odessa touched my arm with mock sympathy. You can stay home, darling. Organize the pantry, catch up on laundry. We'll bring you a souvenir. The airport noise faded. The boarding calls, the suitcase wheels, even my children's giggles blurred into a distant hum. I looked at my husband, the man I supported financially and emotionally for years, and saw not a partner, but someone who believed my labor was his entitlement. I inhaled slowly, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. I understand, I said calmly. Odessa blinked, surprised I wasn't collapsing. I opened the folder and placed the entire stack of reservations, hotel confirmations, insurance, transfers, on the counter next to Odessa's passport. Everything is under my name, I said quietly. Since you've decided everything without me, I won't get in the way. Sterling sighed, relieved, as if I had removed a burden from his shoulders. He leaned forward to kiss my cheek, but I stepped back. Have a good flight, I said, then turned and walked toward the airport exit, spine straight, heartbeat steady. Behind me, Odessa giggled. See? I told you she wouldn't mind. She's not built for travel anyway. The automatic doors opened, letting in a rush of cool Atlanta air. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, found the contact marked Mr. Abernathy, private banking, and pressed call. Mrs. Vaughn? He answered immediately. It's been a while. Julian, I said, watching their plane taxi slowly across the runway through the glass. Do you remember the emergency protocol we discussed? Of course. The one for asset protection in case of family betrayal. I closed my eyes. It's time. Initiate it. Yes, ma'am, he said. Immediately. I went upstairs to the terminal bar, ordered a double Hennessy, and watched their aircraft lift into the sky. The plane I paid for, carrying the people who erased me. I opened my banking app, Sterling's card, Odessa's supplementary card, the household fund, all linked to the account funded solely by me. I pressed Edit. The infinite credit limit vanished with a tap. 0. Their paradise became their problem. Their trip became their punishment. And the wife they underestimated became the woman who finally woke up. I stayed at the bar long enough for the ice in my glass to melt into the amber, long enough for their plane to disappear into the afternoon clouds, long enough for the weight in my chest to settle into something sharper, more deliberate than pain. I didn't go home. I wasn't ready to walk into a house I had cleaned, organized, decorated, and maintained for a husband who had never once asked how heavy all of it felt. Instead, I sat in the corner booth and opened the secure app Mr. Abernathy had once insisted I install, just in case your generosity becomes someone else's entitlement. Sterling used to joke that I was paranoid for having a private banker. Now I understand what he really meant. He thought I would never use it, that I would always forgive, that I would always give, that I would always stay quiet. He didn't know the difference between a quiet woman and a broken one. I was quiet, but I was not broken. Their plane had left the ground 5 minutes earlier when I initiated the second phase of the protocol. Asset freeze, supplemental card removal, travel insurance revocation, and a reclassification of all pending charges. I tapped through every confirmation with the same calm I used when meal prepping the kids' food, folding laundry at midnight, or cleaning up Odessa's messes without complaint. Except this time, every tap was liberation. I knew exactly what was happening in the sky above me. I had lived long enough beside Sterling to predict his reactions with the accuracy of a scientist. At 32,000 feet, sometime after the first round of champagne, because Odessa would insist on champagne, he would order something expensive he didn't need, flash the platinum card he didn't earn, and wait for validation from strangers because he never got enough of it from himself. I imagined the scene vividly. The flight attendant's smile would falter. The terminal would beep. Sterling's smile would freeze. He would try a second card. Another beep. Odessa would gasp dramatically, clutching her fake pearls as if she'd been personally attacked. Sterling would panic enough for the other passengers to notice. Valencia, the woman who had taken my passport and replaced me with her own mother, would hide behind oversized sunglasses, pretending not to be embarrassed. But humiliation clings to the skin like humidity. I finished my drink and stood, leaving a generous tip. The waiter didn't know he had just served a woman in the middle of a quiet revolution. I left the airport, walked across the concrete walkway, and slipped into my car. A used but well-maintained SUV I paid for myself, without Sterling's help, though he loved to say, "We bought it." We implied contribution. He had contributed nothing. The drive home was slow and intentional. Streetlights flickered on as the Atlanta skyline shimmered in the distance. I kept my phone face down on the passenger seat. I knew what waited for me. Dozens of missed calls, frantic voice messages, maybe even threats disguised as pleas. But their flight still had hours to go, and there was peace in that silence. When I arrived home, the first thing I noticed was how hollow the house sounded without the kids. Their laughter, their small footsteps, even their arguing. It all gave life to this space. Without them, and without Sterling's background noise, the house felt like a blank page. A page waiting for me to rewrite everything. I set my bag down, walked to the kitchen, and brewed myself a cup of mint tea. The kettle's whistle filled the quiet like a gentle alarm, reminding me that I was free, even if just for the moment. With the tea steaming in my hand, I opened my phone. 32 missed calls, 14 voicemails, 23 messages. I didn't listen? Not yet. Instead, I opened my encrypted drive, the place where I kept everything Sterling didn't know existed. When I married him, I made the mistake of letting love blind me. But I didn't let it make me stupid. I collected documents, receipts, ownership papers, and business records over the years. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. Sterling's mother raised him to believe everything belonged to him by default, and he treated my income, my effort, and my sacrifices as if they were extensions of his birthright. So, I learned to document, to prepare, to protect myself. In that drive, I opened the folder labeled Estate Structure. Inside were the papers for the townhouse, purchased under my name after using my credit score, because Sterling's was too low. The SUV title? Mine. The education fund account? Mine. The savings account Sterling thought was jointly funded, entirely by me, for 5 straight years. And then there was Sterling's business, the consulting firm he bragged about, the one Odessa used to brag about to her church friends, saying, "My son is a CEO." The one Sterling thanked me for advising on, even though I built the entire client list myself. But every legal document, every registration, every tax form was under my name. Sterling had begged me to sign him as co-owner once, saying it would make me feel like a man. I told him his masculinity shouldn't depend on paper. What I meant was, I didn't trust him with ownership, and today proved why. I scrolled through the digital folder slowly, carefully, not with vengeance, but with the calm of a woman finally accepting a truth she had ignored for too long. Sterling didn't betray me today. Sterling revealed who he had always been. My phone vibrated violently on the counter, then again, and again. I knew their plane had landed. I knew chaos had begun. But I didn't pick up. I needed to breathe first. I needed to finally take up space in my own life. After a few minutes, curiosity tugged at me gently. I opened the message thread. Sterling's first message read, "Val, call me. There's something wrong with the cards." Then, "Why is the hotel saying the reservation is canceled?" Then, "Pick up the phone now. This isn't funny." Then Odessa's message. "You selfish girl, you are ruining this trip. Fix your attitude and turn the cards back on." Then Sterling again. "Val, they're saying we owe $40,000 up front. Are you insane? Answer the phone." Then a softer one. "The kids are crying. Please, just answer." I curled my fingers slowly along the edge of my cup. For years, I responded to every inconvenience, every demand, every meltdown. I rescued Sterling from himself. I absorbed Odessa's insults. I shielded my children from chaos. But not today. Today, I let my silence speak. I took a long sip of tea, let the warmth steady me, and then typed a single message. The ticket was in my name. You chose to give my place to someone else. Handle the consequences yourselves. Have a pleasant trip. I set the phone down, exhaled, and smiled. Not triumphantly, but peacefully. I wasn't done, not even close, because this was not revenge. This was reclamation. And I was just getting started. By the time they landed in Malé, the sun was beginning to lower itself over the Indian Ocean, casting strips of molten gold across the water. The kind of sight I had imagined for months. The kind of sunset I thought would wash away the strain between us. Instead, it greeted the three people who had boarded a flight with the confidence of royalty and arrived as confused, humiliated wanderers. I imagined Sterling stepping off the aircraft with that forced swagger he used whenever he wanted strangers to believe he was important. Odessa dragging her oversized suitcase with the entitlement of a woman who believed the world functioned only when she approved of it, and the twins clutching their backpacks in confusion, while Valencia adjusted her wide-brimmed hat to hide the embarrassment forming around her mouth. Their mood, I knew, was already cracked from what had happened on the plane. Sterling would have spent the final hours of the flight pacing the aisle, muttering about bank errors, while Odessa demanded to speak to someone in authority, and Valencia hissed at him that he had embarrassed her in front of the entire business class cabin. But nothing prepared them for what came next. At the transfer desk, where luxury travelers were usually welcomed with iced lemongrass towels and chilled coconuts, the captain of the private resort boat glanced at Sterling, then at his tablet, then back at Sterling, with the expression of a man who had seen this sort of downfall before. "Mr. Vaughn," he said flatly, "your reservation has been canceled." I could picture Sterling trying to straighten his shirt collar, lifting his chin to regain composure he didn't possess. "There must be some mistake," he would say, words trembling beneath the surface. "I'm a preferred guest. My wife, the primary account holder," the captain interrupted, "revoked authorization 40 minutes ago." I imagined Odessa grabbing Sterling's arm, her fake gold bangles jangling angrily. "You have no right," she would shriek. "We traveled with children. You must take us." But the captain would not even blink. "I am obligated to follow payment verification rules, ma'am. Without confirmation, this boat is reserved for paying guests. Please step aside." Behind them, I could almost hear the soft gasp of other travelers watching, the silent judgment filling the humid air. Sterling would try to salvage what little dignity remained. "Fine. We'll get there ourselves. A taxi, a ferry, whatever." And that was when their paradise truly shattered. The only ferry available was not a sleek, air-conditioned yacht, but a rusted water taxi that smelled of diesel and wilted fish, packed with backpackers whose travel budgets were a fraction of ours. Sterling, who loved pretending he belonged among elites, would have died a little inside as he dragged Odessa's suitcase on board, sweating through his expensive linen shirt. The wind on those ferries was unforgiving, slapping their faces with salt water, dripping into Odessa's perfectly sprayed hair, unraveling Valencia's blowout, soaking the twins' sleeves. There, in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by strangers and the sound of a sputtering engine, everything Sterling had tried to hide about himself was exposed, and I wasn't even there to witness it. That was the quiet beauty of it. They would have plenty of time to think about me, about what they did, about the trip they stole, and the woman they underestimated. An hour later, when the ferry finally reached the technical pier behind the resort, far from the glamorous entrance, the manager, Rashid, met them with the remorseful, stiff smile that luxury professionals use when delivering devastating news. "Mr. Vaughn," he said, "we only have 2 standard garden rooms available near the maintenance generator. The villa you booked has been reassigned." Odessa would nearly faint. Sterling would stare blankly. Valencia would scream. And the twins, exhausted and sunburned, would pull at their father's shirt, saying, "Daddy, we're hungry," while Sterling tried to negotiate a room he no longer had the privilege to claim. Meanwhile, I sat barefoot on my living room floor back in Atlanta, the evening peaceful around me, the ficus in the corner needing repotting like a small metaphor for my life. The house felt different now, quiet, mine in a way it had never been before. For 9 years, I moved through these rooms as a supporting character in a story that centered around Sterling and Odessa. But tonight, the silence felt like ownership. My phone buzzed on the table again. I didn't rush to it. I poured my tea, added honey, and let the steam rise before finally picking it up. The messages had escalated from panic to anger to blame to desperation. Then came Sterling's voice message, frantic and cracking. "Val," he whispered harshly, as if ashamed someone might overhear him. "They're asking for a $40,000 hold. The villa is gone. There's no boat back until morning. The cards aren't working. You need to fix this. Please. The kids. Please." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words, his fear, his unraveling sink in. For years, I cleaned up every mess he made. For years, I took responsibility for everything he dropped. For years, I forgave, adjusted, swallowed, and survived. But tonight, I let the message sit there. I let it breathe in the air. I let him taste the consequences of what he chose. Sterling and Odessa had taken my seat on that flight. They had taken my place in the family. They had taken the role I earned. They thought I would cry. They thought I would beg. They thought I would collapse. But they didn't know I had been collapsing slowly for years. And now I was finally standing. I typed one sentence and sent it. You chose who you wanted on that plane. Now let her solve it. I set the phone down again, took my tea, and walked to the balcony where the quiet Atlanta night stretched endlessly before me. Somewhere across the world, Sterling was realizing that the woman he dismissed was the one who held everything together. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Not vengeful, not triumphant, just free. By the time the sun fully set over the Maldives and the sky turned a deep indigo, stitched with the faintest silver stars, Sterling had run out of ways to soothe Odessa, out of explanations to give the resort staff, out of lies to feed Valencia, and out of dignity to cover the fact that he had no access to a single dollar in his own name. And that realization hit him with a force stronger than the ferry's waves that had slapped him earlier. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in the quiet hum of a neighborhood settling into its nighttime rhythm, the cicadas singing in the distance, the soft glow of streetlights filtering through the trees. And for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Like I was finally inhabiting a life that had always belonged to me, but was buried under chores, responsibilities, and a marriage that took endlessly without returning anything of equal weight. Still, even in my newfound calm, I could imagine with chilling clarity what was happening inside the resort lobby, thousands of miles away. Sterling standing at the marble counter with sweat clinging to his shirt. Odessa fanning herself dramatically as if the humidity personally offended her. Valencia pacing back and forth with her overpriced sandals slapping the tile floor, her voice shrill enough for guests across the hall to look up with annoyance, and the twins slumped on a bench, hungry, tired, and confused, watching the adults they trusted crumble. Rashid, with his immaculate uniform and polite but exhausted smile, would have been explaining the situation for the third or fourth time, his voice steady. "Sir, Without payment verification and without the primary account holder physically present, we simply cannot provide access to the villa. And Sterling, trying desperately to sound authoritative, would argue, "My wife will fix this. She's just upset." But Rashid would shake his head, with the kind of patience that comes from dealing with wealthy guests who assumed their crises were everyone's responsibility. Odessa would burst in. "She is doing this out of spite. That girl always had a jealous streak." And Valencia would chime in. "She's punishing us because she's insecure. You know she never fit into this family, Sterling." As if the emotional labor I had poured into that family for nearly a decade had evaporated the moment I refused to be their doormat. But what none of them understood was that this wasn't retaliation. It wasn't emotional theatrics. It wasn't a tantrum. This was clarity. This was boundaries. This was the first time I allowed myself to stop cushioning the consequences of their cruelty. I pictured Sterling's phone vibrating non-stop with my unread messages as he desperately tried to get a signal, walking around the lobby like a man drowning on dry land, while Odessa shouted at the concierge and Valencia berated a young staff member who had absolutely no power to fix anything. If I had been there, I would have been the one smoothing things over, apologizing, problem solving, negotiating, trying to keep the peace, trying to be the adult in a family that mistook my stability for servitude. But I wasn't there. And without me, everything Sterling built in his illusions trembled, because it had always been me holding it up. At home, I took another sip of tea, the mint cooling my mouth, grounding me as the night air shifted gently across my skin, and I opened my laptop again, its glow lighting my face as I reviewed every financial structure Sterling depended on. The business registrations, the tax IDs, the accounts he bragged about but never managed. And the longer I scrolled, the more the truth solidified. There was no part of our life he could sustain without me. My phone lit up again, this time with a video call. Sterling. I let it ring out. Then Valencia, then Odessa, then Sterling again, the desperation increasing in each attempt. Finally, a voice message came in, Odessa's voice shrill and cracking. "Valencia Vaughn, you answer this phone right now, or so help me. I will tell everyone how ungrateful." I deleted it without listening to the rest. My peace was worth more than her accusations. Another message arrived, Sterling this time, his voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. "Please, Val, just talk to me. The kids are tired, the heat is bad, and the hotel won't give us water without a room number. Please, I'm begging you. Just tell me what you want." But the irony of that last sentence wasn't lost on me, because for years I had wanted him to see me, to hear me, to understand me. And now he wanted to negotiate when the one thing I had always asked for, respect, was the one thing he refused to give. Instead of replying, I opened a different folder on my laptop, the one labeled contingency. Because long before today, I had sensed a fracture in our foundation, the subtle dismissals, the way Sterling allowed his mother to speak to me like I was disposable, the way he took every sacrifice I made as something owed. And inside that folder, were the documents for the townhouse, the amendments to the business structure, the savings account transferred quietly into my sole name months earlier, and a list of dates marking every time I had financially saved Sterling without his knowledge. I wasn't preparing to destroy him. I was preparing to stop being destroyed. Outside, a soft breeze moved through the leaves, and for a moment, I imagined what it would feel like to build a life where I wasn't the scaffolding holding everything upright. Then another message came, this time from Valencia, shorter than the others, sharper. If you don't fix this now, you will regret it. And I stared at those words, at the audacity of a woman who had taken my seat on a plane I paid for, who had manipulated my husband into erasing me, who believed I would crumble the moment she pushed. And instead of anger, I laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes from recognizing how deeply someone miscalculates your strength. I typed one final message before putting my phone on silent for the rest of the night. Your actions created your circumstances. Handle them. Then I closed the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and allowed the silence to settle around me like armor. And as I sat there beneath the soft glow of the balcony lights, I realized something profound. Not only did they not know who I truly was, I had forgotten it too. But now, piece by piece, I was remembering. While the night settled warmly over Atlanta, the Maldives greeted Sterling, Odessa, and Valencia with a different kind of darkness, one that crept quietly, suffocating their arrogance inch by inch. At that moment, inside the brightly lit but tension-soaked lobby of Azure Bay, the three of them sat like stranded travelers whose illusions had finally run out of places to hide. Sterling slumped on a bench with his elbows on his knees, staring at the marble floor as if it could reveal a miracle. Odessa, pacing back and forth while muttering dramatic phrases about injustice. And Valencia, tapping furiously on her phone as if sheer anger could rewire the resort's financial policies. Meanwhile, the twins huddled beside their luggage, their little faces red from heat and confusion, occasionally glancing at their father whenever he raised his voice. And Sterling, in his desperation, kept signaling them to stay quiet, unaware that in that moment, he looked less like a father in control and more like a man whose illusions of superiority had been washed away by the ocean breeze. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew every detail because chaos leaves predictable footprints when it hits people who have never learned to stand on their own. As Sterling kept checking his phone for non-existent updates from me, the lobby's automatic doors slid open and a new couple walked in. Golden tan, effortlessly chic, radiating wealth with the kind of ease that made Sterling unconsciously pull at the wrinkles in his shirt. He hated being reminded of what true luxury looked like, especially now that he stood on the opposite side of it. Odessa glared at them with envy, adjusting her crooked wig as if it might help restore her fading sense of superiority. Valencia flipped her hair, pretending to be unbothered, but jealousy clung to her like humidity, because deep down, she had built her identity on performing wealth. Without credit cards and designer outfits and curated social media photos, she was nothing but a frightened girl who feared being ordinary. Rashid, the resort manager, walked past them again, offering bottled water to other guests, but pointedly ignoring Sterling's attempts to wave him over. And Sterling, swallowing what little pride he had left, finally pulled himself together enough to approach the front desk once more. "Sir," Rashid said, before Sterling even opened his mouth. As I explained, without payment verification or the presence of the primary account holder, there is nothing I can do. We have provided information about the public ferry schedule. The next departure is tomorrow morning at 8. And Sterling's voice cracked as he whispered, "We have kids. Surely the resort can make an exception." But Rashid remained unmoved, polite but unbending, the kind of professional who had dealt with thousands of people like Sterling, entitled, underprepared, and used to women cleaning up their messes. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of untouched mail beside me, the lamp casting a warm glow over the hardwood floors, the quiet so steady it felt like a living thing, like something I hadn't allowed myself to experience in years. And I thought about the countless nights I'd stayed awake to pay bills. Sterling forgot. Nights I pulled double shifts to keep the business afloat while he strutted around calling himself an entrepreneur. How many times I apologized on his behalf, cleaned up his mother's messes, swallowed insults, endured manipulation, and convinced myself that holding everything together was what a good wife did. But now, as the minutes passed and the messages on my phone multiplied, I finally understood the truth that had escaped me for so long. Good wives don't disappear into the lives of the people they love. They don't set themselves on fire to keep others warm. They don't erase their own suffering to uphold someone else's pride. For years, I had let Sterling believe I needed him. Let Odessa believe she had power over me. Let Valencia believe she was above me. But that illusion had been shattered the moment they decided I was expendable. My phone buzzed again, and this time I opened the screen, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. The newest message was a picture Sterling had taken of Odessa, sitting on her suitcase outside the resort doors. Fans pointed at her from two portable blowers the staff used for events, her face red and blotchy as she clutched her chest dramatically, clearly trying to sell the idea of a heart attack. Valencia was standing next to her, shouting at a staff member while holding her phone high, no doubt threatening to expose the resort online. Sterling's message read, "Val, please, Mom isn't feeling well, the kids are exhausted, and it's hot. Please just fix this. I know you're mad, but this is going too far." And the moment I read it, a deep, strange stillness washed over me. The kind of clarity that comes only when a woman stops living for people who wouldn't sacrifice even comfort for her. And I typed back, "Odessa had plenty of energy when she took my seat. Handle it." Then muted the chat. I finished the tea, washed the cup, dried it carefully, and placed it back on the shelf. A small act, but one that grounded me in a sense of control I had forgotten I even possessed. While their night in the Maldives stretched into frustration, mine unfolded with a simplicity I had not felt in years. I lit a candle, opened the window to let in the warm night breeze, and sat down to make a list. Not of tasks or obligations or things I owed to Sterling's family, but a list of things I wanted for myself, things I had buried under the heavy weight of marriage. I wasn't thinking about revenge or punishment. I was thinking about balance, about identity, about the future I could build without carrying the dead weight of people who saw me as a resource rather than a partner. As I wrote, my phone buzzed again with a new notification, not from them, but from my bank alert system, confirming the freeze was holding, the accounts were secure, the structure untouched, and, for the first time in a long time, I smiled with a kind of quiet satisfaction that felt like strength. And somewhere across the world, Sterling probably felt his last tiny thread of control slipping from his hands without understanding that he was the one who cut it. While I drifted into the kind of peaceful sleep a woman earns only when she finally stops rescuing people who never lifted a finger for her, the night in the Maldives stretched on like an endlessly tightening rope for Sterling, Odessa, and Valencia. The resort lobby shut its lights one section at a time, the luxury staff retreating to their breaks, the soft closing of doors reminding Sterling with each echo that he was no longer welcome in spaces he once entered with entitlement, and the humid island air settled heavily around them as they sat outside on a stone bench, mosquitoes circling Odessa's oversprayed perfume cloud. The twins curled against their luggage, half asleep and hungry. Every time the automatic doors whooshed open to welcome another wealthy guest into cool, scented air, Odessa glared as if the resort itself were insulting her personally, and Valencia kept pacing in circles, her sandals clicking on the stone path like a metronome of frustration, muttering about lawsuits, discrimination, favoritism, anything she could weaponize to compensate for the humiliation she didn't know how to absorb. Meanwhile, Sterling's phone battery had dwindled to 13%, and with each passing minute, he unlocked it again, hoping for a message from me, his thumbs trembling as if he could summon me with desperation alone. But all he found were my two unread responses and the silence he never thought I was capable of giving him. Across the world, as the Maldives sank deeper into night, Atlanta bloomed into morning, sunlight stretching across my comforter like a soft reminder of a new beginning, and I woke with a clarity I had not felt since the early years of our marriage, before Odessa began tightening her grip and Sterling began shrinking under her approval. I showered, wrapped myself in a robe, made breakfast, not for anyone else, not rushed or hurried or rehearsed, but slow, intentional, purely for myself. And as I ate, I let the morning news hum quietly in the background while I scrolled through the financial dashboards. Sterling never bothered to understand. Everything was stable, secure, fully under my control. It wasn't vindictive. It was responsible. The life I built could no longer be handled by people who treated my effort like a bottomless well. And while I sat there sipping coffee, an alert came through. Location ping detected from the Vaughn family account. Azure Bay Resort vicinity. They were still there, stranded, stuck between embarrassment and necessity. And the absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Back in the Maldives, the sky lightened into weak pink streaks as staff began preparing for the breakfast buffet, And as trays of pastries and fresh fruit were carried past the open-air dining area, the smell drifted towards Sterling's group, awakening Odessa, who had spent the last hour whining about her back, her ankles, her dignity. She sat up, blinking dramatically as if she had survived some catastrophic event. Sterling, I cannot sit out here in this wilderness one more minute. Go in there and demand service, she said, fanning herself with a brochure. Sterling rubbed his forehead, exhaustion pressing down on him like a weight he didn't recognize. He had spent most of the night trying to find a local ATM that accepted their cards. None did. He had tried calling the U.S. Bank. No answer at this hour. He had tried messaging me again. No reply. And each time he looked at his children, their small faces drooping with fatigue, the truth gnawed at him harder. He had chosen the wrong person to betray. After sunrise, Rashid returned to the lobby wearing a fresh uniform, greeting new arrivals with warm professionalism, before turning to Sterling with a polite but weary expression. Sir, the public ferry departs in 2 hours. If you would like a taxi to the pier, we can arrange it. And Sterling, hollowed out by humiliation, nodded weakly. Because even pride eventually gives way to reality when there is no one left to hold it up. Valencia tried one last time, stepping forward with feigned composure, saying, Look, we've had a misunderstanding with our bank, but we are guests of a certain level. Surely your management can make an exception. Just 2 rooms, even for the kids. But Rashid shook his head, his tone respectful yet firm. Madam, we cannot extend credit without verification. I am truly sorry, but policy is strict, especially during peak season. Our hands are tied. And the finality of that sentence made something inside Valencia snap. She grabbed Sterling's arm, hissing through her teeth. Call her again, Sterling. Call her until she picks up. Do you understand that this is her fault? She's doing this to embarrass you. Us. And Sterling, drained, tired of pretending, tired of defending what he couldn't save, whispered, No, Val, this is our fault. We did this. Words he had never spoken in his life. Not to her, not to his mother, not even to himself. Odessa scoffed loudly. Don't you dare blame us, Sterling. That girl has been trouble since day one. Always emotional, always dramatic, always making everything harder. And Sterling finally looked at his mother, eyes hollow, voice low, and said something she never expected to hear. Mom, she paid for everything. This whole trip was hers. We took from her, and now she's done letting us. This isn't drama. It's consequences. And Odessa's mouth fell open, her entire posture collapsing under the realization that her son was no longer playing along with her narrative. That shift, the tiny fracture in Sterling's loyalty, was the beginning of a collapse far bigger than any canceled reservation. As the 3 of them boarded a small taxi van toward the public ferry dock, their luggage piled between their knees, children whining softly, humidity clinging to their clothes, tourists filming them discreetly, that collapse grew louder, clearer, undeniable. Meanwhile, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror back home, applying moisturizer while sunlight warmed the tiles beneath my feet. And, for the first time in years, I didn't look tired. I didn't look drained. I didn't look invisible. I looked like a woman waking up from a long, exhausting dream, stepping into her own life again. And somewhere across the world, Sterling finally understood the one truth he had ignored for too long. The moment you push away the woman who holds everything together is the moment everything falls apart. As the small taxi van rattled its way toward the public ferry dock, the Maldives' breathtaking beauty did nothing to soften the sting of humiliation clinging to Sterling and his family like a second skin. The lush palm trees swayed gently overhead. Turquoise waves lapped rhythmically against the shore, and honeymooners passed by, glowing with carefree elegance. But for Sterling, Odessa, and Valencia, the island paradise felt more like a stage spotlight, exposing every mistake they had ever made. Each bump in the road reminding them that entitlement offers no cushioning when the world finally stops bending to your comfort. At the dock, a crowd of locals and backpackers gathered with worn backpacks and cheap flip-flops, some chatting quietly, others dozing on benches. And when Sterling approached the ferry booth to check the schedule, the attendant barely lifted his eyes, pointing to the sign that read, "Next departure, 8 Mach a.m., public access only, expect delay." And the lack of special treatment stung Sterling harder than he expected. Odessa collapsed dramatically onto her suitcase, placing one hand on her chest as though reliving a telenovela heart attack scene, muttering loud enough for the crowd to hear, "This is barbaric. I am not made for this. I have never, ever been treated like this in my life." And Valencia, sweat dampening the edges of her silk blouse, snapped at the kids for moving too slowly, then snapped at Sterling for walking too fast, then snapped at Odessa for whining too loudly, her nerves unraveling with every passing second. No one comforted her this time. No one soothed her. Not even Sterling, who sat stiffly beside the twins, overwhelmed by shame and fatigue. Somewhere inside that shame, an uncomfortable truth flickered. Without me, he was not just struggling, he was lost. Meanwhile, across the ocean in Atlanta, while their misery fermented in the heat, my morning unfolded with unhurried serenity. I folded laundry at a pace that felt almost luxurious, played soft music in the background, and watered my plants like a woman finally reclaiming parts of her life she had ignored for too long. The quiet felt honest now, not like the silence of suppression, but the silence of clarity. And as I moved through the house, that suddenly felt larger without the burden of constant caretaking. I thought of all the times Sterling had told me, "You're overreacting. You're being emotional. You're making things harder than they need to be." Each phrase now echoing with the absurdity of a man who couldn't even book a hotel room without me. Back at the dock, Valencia's patience broke first. She stood abruptly and marched towards Sterling, her eyes sharp with accusation, a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You should have put everything in your own name, like I told you to. You let her control everything. And now, look at us. Look at what she's doing to us, Sterling." And Sterling, drained to the point of transparency, whispered, "Val, she trusted me. I let her down." And that admission, soft, fragile, but real, sent Odessa into a rage. "Don't you dare blame yourself," she snapped. "That girl tricked you, manipulated you. She has always been selfish, always wanted to make you look small. She is doing this to punish you." But Sterling shook his head slowly, each movement heavy with years of denial cracking apart. "No, Mom. She carried this family. I just let everyone dump things on her because it was easy. Too easy." And Odessa's face contorted with disbelief, because for the first time, her son wasn't defending her, wasn't choosing her narrative, wasn't bending to her guilt tripping. And in that moment, the hierarchy she had built, Sterling obeying her, me beneath them, collapsed, leaving her furious, confused, and powerless. The ferry finally arrived with a groaning, mechanical whine. The crowd surged forward, and as Sterling helped the twins aboard, Valencia hissed, "You better fix this when we get back home." But Sterling didn't respond. He didn't promise. He didn't reassure her. He simply guided the children inside without looking back. The ride was long and rough, waves slapping against the wooden hull, spray hitting their faces. Guests crammed elbow to elbow on narrow benches. And with every rock of the boat, Sterling felt another layer of illusion peel away. The illusion that his mother's comfort mattered more than mine. The illusion that Valencia was the dependable partner. The illusion that he was the provider, the protector, the head of the household. A man cannot lead a life he did not build. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, I finished reviewing the last of the business documents and sent a single email to my lawyer, instructing him to finalize the separation of financial structures. I wasn't filing for divorce yet. That decision required calm, not impulse. But I was removing every rope Sterling used to climb into a life that wasn't his to begin with. My fingers hovered for a moment before pressing send. And the moment I did, the air around me shifted, a symbolic release from years of constant responsibility. A few hours later, as the ferry approached the main island, Sterling, Odessa, and Valencia stepped off with stiff legs and stiff pride, their clothes wrinkled, hair wind tangled, and tempers frayed. The twins clung to his hands, hungry, sunburned, miserable, and Sterling felt something tighten painfully in his chest, not because of embarrassment, but because he finally saw what I had been carrying all along. They stood in a circle near the pier, the noise of the marketplace swirling around them, vendors shouting, tourists laughing, scooters humming, and Odessa began again, her voice high and brittle. "Sterling, you call that woman now. Do you hear me? You demand that she fix this." And Sterling, finally, said in a voice so low it nearly vanished under the sounds of the island, "No, I'm done demanding from someone who gave us everything." And that sentence silenced Odessa for the first time in years. Thousands of miles away, I stood on my porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft orange hues, the steam from my coffee drifting upward. And in that quiet moment, I knew something was shifting, not just in them, but in me. The woman they thought would chase after them was gone. The woman they thought they could dismiss had awakened. And the family dynamic they had relied on for nearly a decade would never, ever return to the shape they preferred. When the taxi dropped them at a budget hotel near the Malay harbor, the kind of place backpackers used as a layover before taking ferries to cheaper islands, Sterling carried the suitcases wordlessly. Odessa complained about the smell of disinfectant in the lobby, and Valencia insisted on filming the peeling wallpaper for some future rant she planned to upload online, as if public sympathy would magically restore the luxury they had lost. The twins were too exhausted to speak, their eyes heavy, their cheeks flushed from heat and disappointment. And when Sterling tried to check in, the receptionist asked for payment upfront. The amount embarrassingly small compared to the resort, but still out of reach now that every card linked to my accounts had been severed. Sterling swallowed hard before asking, "Is there an ATM nearby?" Only to hear the same answer again. "Your bank is declining authorization." Watching the three of them shuffle toward the elevator with a single room key, sharing a cramped space that smelled faintly of mildew, their expensive outfits rumpled, their pride deflated, their expectations shattered, would have been a sight I once pitied, but no longer. Pity is a luxury that belongs to the innocent, and they had forfeited their innocence the moment they told me my seat, my place, belonged to Odessa. Back in Atlanta, I sat on my couch with the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the room, my laptop open, documents neatly arranged on the screen, the attorney's number highlighted, not because I was rushing to divorce, but because I was preparing for whatever path I chose next. And preparation felt like power, the kind of power I had spent too many years giving away. My phone buzzed again, not with messages this time, but with a video call request from Sterling, his name glowing across the screen. And for a long moment, I simply stared at it, remembering every time I answered him instantly, even when I was overwhelmed, tired, or hurt, remembering how he took that availability for granted. And then I let the call ring out. Seconds later, another call came, this one from the twins' tablet, and that one I answered, because my boundaries were with the adults, not with the children. Their tired little faces filled the screen, Cairo's voice soft as he said, "Mommy, we're at a scary place." And Zuri whispered, "We want you." And though something inside me tightened painfully, I held my voice steady and warm because their innocence did not deserve to be bruised by the choices of the grown-ups around them. "I love you both so much," I told them gently, "and you will come home soon, safe and sound. Daddy will take good care of you on the way back." And behind them, Sterling hovered, trying to get into the frame, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice shaking as he said, "Val, please, can we talk?" But before I could decide whether to respond, Odessa's shrill voice erupted from somewhere off-screen. "Give me that tablet! She owes us an explanation." And I watched Sterling's face crumble at that single sentence, because for the first time, he heard the truth in her tone. The entitlement, the ownership, the belief that I was a resource, not a partner. I gently told the twins I would see them soon, ended the call, and muted every device they had access to. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. And once the silence returned, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Meanwhile, in Malay, the reality of everything they had lost began to settle like dust on their skin. Odessa cried loudly through the thin hotel walls, claiming her back was ruined from the ferry ride. Valencia sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through her phone, searching for sympathy online but finding none, and Sterling stood at the window, staring out at the dimly lit harbor as if searching for the man he always pretended to be, but had never become. Exhaustion cracked him open, and in that quiet, foreign city, he finally allowed himself to feel the consequences of his choices, not as inconveniences, not as accidents, but as the logical end of a path he chose the moment he sided with his mother against his wife. When the public ferry carried them back to the airport the next morning, they weren't a family on vacation. They were a fractured collection of regret, resentment, and unspoken truths. At the airport, Sterling used the last of his cash to buy water and crackers for the twins, while Odessa and Valencia sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact with everyone, including each other. By the time they boarded the flight home, humiliation clung to them like salt water dried onto skin. Hours later, when Sterling's car pulled into our driveway in Atlanta, I stood at the window, watching, not hiding, not angry, merely observing as a chapter of my life physically returned to the place it had taken so long to drain. He carried the kids inside first, quietly, tenderly, almost reverently, as if he knew they were the only thing left unbroken between us. Odessa stepped out next, wobbling dramatically, glaring at the house, as if it had personally betrayed her. And Valencia exited last, moving slowly, her arrogance dimmed, her certainty cracked, her eyes avoiding mine at all costs. Sterling finally approached the door. His shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper when he said, "Val, I'm home. Can we talk?" And behind him, Odessa muttered, "She better apologize." But Sterling turned sharply, genuinely, and said with more strength than I had ever heard from him, "No, Mom, this is not her apology to give." And Odessa froze, stunned, the hierarchy permanently broken. I opened the door slowly, not to invite chaos in, not to surrender, not to resume the role of the woman they thought they knew, but to stand firmly in the identity they never bothered to learn. Sterling met my eyes, regret swirling beneath the exhaustion, and he said the words he never once said in 9 years of marriage. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hurt you." But silence was my reply, not out of cruelty, but because apologies mean nothing without transformation, and I needed time, real time, to decide the shape of my future. As the air between us filled with the weight of everything unspoken, I realized the truth that would carry me into whatever came next. I didn't need revenge to feel empowered. I didn't need their suffering to reclaim myself. All I needed was the moment I finally stopped begging to be valued. And now that I had chosen myself, the world shifted in my favor. Not with noise, not with drama, but with a quiet certainty that the wife they dismissed would never again be the woman they could overlook. It wasn't the ending they expected, and it wasn't the ending they wanted, but it was the ending they earned and the beginning I had always deserved.